It was a quiet Monday morning, with only the sounds of birds chirping in the air. The sun was just appearing over the rooftops of the houses, piercing through the morning dew. A postman, seemingly a bit worse for wear, goes to collect letters from his first letterbox, his bloodshot eyes squinting in the morning sun. He bends down and opens the box with his keys and pulls out the first letter.
For fuck's sake, not again,
he says with a hint of exasperation. His hands shake as he opens up the letter. Scrawled on the front of the letter was the address. 10 fucking Downing Street.
One of these days I'm gonna not see this and it's gonna actually get sent,
he says with a little smile. He opens up the letter, pulls out a handful of pubes and a note written in a 4-year-old's handwriting. He reads it aloud.
Dear Prime Minister, I heard you like fish. I don't have any fish, but here's some crabs. Yours, Gilbert.
He chuckles.
Classic.
He has in fact written this exact letter every week for the past 7 months. Maybe someday Mr. Cameron will actually for once be the recipient. He shuts the postbox, turns the key, and strolls back to his van. Unbeknownst to Gilbert, someone had drawn a Hitler mustache on his upper lip, shaved off his eyebrows, and written, "Fuck off eyebrows" on his forehead. Gilbert pulls up his van at a rundown house, with green mold rising up the walls. He lets out a long sigh as he grips the glove box handle. Giving it a good jerk, he yanks it clean off. An old woman walking past the van jumps with fright as the loud bellow of Gilbert rings around the street.
Bastardy wanky bastardy wankers.
The van begins to sway vigorously as the old woman shakes her head and carries on her morning stroll. Inside the van, Gilbert is kicking fuck out of the glove box, gripping the wheel for purchase. The box finally gives up and opens. A waterfall of empty half bottles releases into the footwell. Left in the compartment is a soggy-looking brown envelope. Picking up the envelope, he leaves the van and walks up the overgrown path to the front door. Entering the house, he shouts,
Johnny, Johnny, I've got your fucking breakfast.
He walks into the kitchen. The house is in an absolute state. Old clothes and food laying around, and black mold extends from wall to wall. He pulls a frying pan out of a cupboard with a missing door and throws it on a camper's portable gas cooker. He turns it on, tears one end of the soggy envelope, and holding it above the pan, lets the contents drop out. 2 rashers of bacon, an egg, and a sweetie drumstick. They sizzle as they land. Bang! Johnny suddenly comes running backwards out of a cupboard at the other end of the room.
Fucking parallel universe! Do you know what I did to myself in there?
He says angrily. Johnny turns around to face Gilbert.
Fucking Luke!
Both his eyebrows had been shaved off and the words "fuck off eyebrows" had been scrawled on his head with a permanent marker. He glances down at Gilbert trying desperately to flip a melting sweetie drumstick with a fish slice.
Haha, they got you too,
laughs Johnny. A blank stare comes across Gilbert's face. Although, with no eyebrows, it wasn't exactly easy to determine what emotion was going through him.
Oh, Christ,
Gilbert snaps.
We're in the fucking cupboard again. No wonder I can remember sod all from last night. We have got to stop going in there. Anyway, breakfast's up.
Johnny joins Gilbert, perching on an upside-down beer crate as they share out the food.
You'll never guess who my next letter's for,
spluttered Gilbert as the burst egg spews down the side of his overly bearded face. Johnny glances up with a smile.
Old Billy Broderick?
Yep,
sighs Gilbert.
That old pervert will probably be standing waiting with his knob sellotaped to the door handle for when I arrive. Last time he gave me a handful of Maltesers for the road. Just before I put the first one in my mouth, I got this strong smell. The old fucker had collected sheep petals in a jar from the field next door, then taken the time to coat each one in chocolate.
Yeah,
replied Johnny.
He's a bit of a character.
Aye, and the fucking rest. Good thing I had breakfast before I got them. Might have eaten a lot instead of 3 or 4,
says Gilbert. They both pause and then burst out into over-the-top room filling laughs, shot blasting each other with half-chewed food.
Ah, fuck it,
says Gilbert.
I better freshen up then get on the rounds.
He gets up and sets off to the front door, grabbing a crabby old Magic Tree air freshener and stuffing it down the crotch of his pants. Johnny yells,
We still on for the pub tonight, Gibbs?
Gilbert shouts back as the door swings shut.
Is my left nut made of wood?
The sound of tires squealing echoes around the housing estate as the old red Vauxhall post van appears over the horizon, swerving side to side, black smoke almost obscuring the van with green neon headlights shining through the haze. The engine revving so high it's as if it's screaming at the driver to change gear. The brakes are slammed on, and a trail of burnt rubber streaks across the road. There's a thud as the wheels mount the curb and come to a stop. 10 feet from the bumper, old Mrs. Jenkinson, holding her Zimmer frame, shakes her fist in fury.
God damn it, Gilbert!
She cries in a strained, feeble voice.
Can't you see I'm walking here, you twat?
Gilbert mutters under his breath.
I've seen 2-legged donkeys welded to cruise ship anchors walk faster than you old muff maggot.
He gets out of the van and gives Mrs. Jenkinson a wave as he jumps past her over the pavement and heads up to Billy's door. Mrs. Jenkinson continues her daily walk. She lives half a mile from the local shop, but as it takes her so long, she has to leave at 9 a.m. to get there just before the shop closes at 5 p.m. The fear of what he might come across when he opens the door is making Gilbert's hands sweat. He looks up at the well-kept old Victorian house, takes a deep breath, turns the doorknob, and slowly pushes the door open. He takes a quick glance around the room. Nothing. He breathes a sigh of relief as he quietly places the letter down on the floor.
Postman! Postman! Postman!
A figure appearing at the head of the stairs screams. Startled, Gilbert jumps back and knocks into a shoe rack beside the door. The old man was wearing a 70s-style Superman cloak around his back, an egg cup on his crotch, one sock and knee pads, and nothing else. His ribs were sticking out through his pale, white torso.
Is it a letter from the mayor?
Billy cried out.
Is he in trouble?
Nope,
replied Gilbert, half closing his eyes to prevent his brain processing the image.
looks like it's from eBay.
Read it out!
Billy cried in an opera-style voice. Gilbert Tears opens up the envelope and proceeds to read out the letter.
Dear Mr. Broderick, due to your unspeakably vile behavior, you have been banned from the site, and we have forwarded your details onto the police. The package you sent to Mrs. Patterson has left her in a state of shock. She had to be taken to the hospital and is likely to need psychiatric treatment. Hellman's mayonnaise, as you called it, is not a suitable substitute for Hellman's mayonnaise. The 6 jars with crudely drawn pictures of Satan on the front of them, containing what I can only assume is cow sperm, is beyond anything we have ever encountered. We have contacted Mrs. Patterson, and she is pressing serious charges. She says she'll never be able to eat a ham sandwich again. We will be in contact soon.
Billy laughs dementedly. He disappears out of view as quickly as he appeared. Gilbert backs out of the house, keeping his eyes to the front. As soon as he passes the door threshold, he bolts for the van, not even bothering to close the house door. Gilbert sits in the van, gathering his thoughts.
At least he was on a good day.
He says to himself out loud as he thumps the van in gear and speeds off, tires spinning. As he drives along, heading into the upstreet part of town, he picks up a parcel off the passenger seat, and an eerie, crooked grin creeps over his face.
Ah, Miss Taylor.
He then raises his eyebrows suggestively a few times. Well, he would have, if he had any eyebrows. He pulls up slowly and carefully beside a big wall covered in hanging vines. Through the gate beyond the wall sits a neat small house surrounded by row after row of colorful flowers. He is about to get out of the van, but then sits back in. He turns the heating full on and holds the glue-sealed end of her parcel up to the blower. Checking the windows often to make sure no one is watching, he slowly peels it open once the glue melts. Digging inside, he pulls out some sexy lingerie. He bells it up and crams it against his nose, taking a huge sniff, throwing his head back. He then lets out a big breath.
Good gods,
he says, drooling out one side of his mouth. A mischievous look appears on his face as he scratches his chin. The other hand drops down and unbuttons his zip. Outside the van, a couple hand in hand are walking along the pavement. They stop in their tracks 20 feet from the van. They turn to one another confused and begin to mutter, pointing at the violently shaking vehicle ahead. They cautiously edge forward, trying to decipher what exactly is going on. Inside, Gilbert is whacking himself off vigorously with the knickers over his head. Blaring out of the speakers is Motorhead's Ace of Spades at full volume. The couple's heads appear in the driver's side window, the couple being Miss Taylor and her 6-foot rugby player boyfriend. After about 5 seconds of peering in, they realize what is going on and whose knickers is perched on the pervert's head. Unbeknownst to Gilbert, who is whacking away, her boyfriend opens the door and rips him out of the van. Gibbs lets out a cry of despair.
What the fuck is wrong with you, Gibbs?
Shouts Miss Taylor. The boyfriend marches him to the back of the van by the back of his top collar, his legs flailing behind. The 6-foot monster takes a grip of Gilbert's head and smacks it into the side of the van with a big thud. Gilbert's face crumples into the bodywork. Miss Taylor turns away with her nose in the air.
Come on, let's go.
She takes her boyfriend's hand, and they go in through the garden gate. Gilbert peels his face out of the side of the van and checks all his facial features are still present. He glances down at his bright red Postman Pat wristwatch, then has a quick look around the contents in the back of his van. It's 4:20, and there's still more than half of the packages and letters to deliver.
Fuck it,
he says with a hint of resignation. He gets back in the driver's seat once more and speeds off. A female seagull flies back to her nest with a mouth full of fish. Landing down on the edge of the cliff, she opens her mouth and spills the contents into 3 eager chicks battling to get their fill. With all the commotion of the feeding, the female seagull never notices a closely approaching big black wheel. Just in time, it stops, squashing down one corner of the nest. Out steps Gilbert, strolling to the edge of the cliff. Glancing out over the edge, wind swept by the ocean breeze, he surveys his surroundings.
Right,
he says as he bounds around to the back of the van. He opens up both doors, which groan and creak as he pushes them all the way back. Back in the front seat of the van, he reverses back across the grassy hilltop towards the main road. A 3-point turn at the gate, and he's all set. Violently revving up the engine, his eyes focus on the rear-view mirror, not blinking. After an unnecessarily long build-up, he slams the van in reverse. As the van gains speed, Gilbert wrestles with the wheel to keep it straight. 3, 2, 1, bang. On he hammers the brakes as the van screeches and skids to an eventual stop. Shoot! Out flies all the parcels and letters as they sail over the edge of the cliff. Dozens of letters catch the wind and fly out into the distance. The few larger parcels crash their way down the cliff face, wiping out seabird nests as they go. The front wheel of the van has stopped at the same nest as before. There's no feeding frenzy this time, though. The female bird and 3 chicks stare blankly at the big black wheel, which had for the second time in 5 minutes tried to wipe them from this earth. Gilbert rubs his hands together with joy.
Pub time,
he says excitedly as he drives off. Gilbert pulls up next to an old traditional pub on the outskirts of town, knocking a large plant pot over in the process. The Irvine Inn sits just off the main road against a backdrop of thick woodland. Its nice, picturesque look on the outside doesn't always match the scene inside, especially later in the evenings. He gets out of the van and straightens himself out in the reflection of the passenger window, licking his hand and trying to do his hair. On his way to the door, he passes a shitty old motorbike lying on its side, still running with the back wheel spinning in midair. Black clouds of smoke coming from the exhaust. The bike number plate reads J56NNY. He glances down.
Ah, for fuck's sake. Johnny's left his lights on.
He reaches over and turns them off, leaving the bike on its side still running, and proceeds to walk in the door. Inside the old pub, there's a scattering of people sitting around tables chatting. Beyond the seating area, there's a back room with a pool table where an old black and white TV sits on a stool. Colorblind Bob, usually perched 2 feet from the screen, watching documentaries on butterflies and flowers. Gilbert walks across the creaky wooden floor to Johnny, who is sitting at the bar. He's dressed in a badly worn and beat-up dog-like onesie costume. Johnny turns around.
Way, Gibbs, you cunt. Where you been? Your pint's getting cold.
He shouts. Turning back to the bar for a sip of his own pint, he picks up the full one next to it and throws it back over his shoulder without looking. The pint sails past Gilbert's head and smashes on the wall.
Why are you so late, Gibbs? You haven't actually delivered some mail, have you?
Johnny laughs.
Nah, had a little run-in with Miss Taylor.
Explains Gilbert.
Ooh, yeah. She's got a smoking hot personality.
Replies Johnny with a mischievous look on his face. They pause, then both cry out with laughter.
So, Johnny, you been rounding up sheep today?
Aye,
Says Johnny.
I had to break out the old wolf suit for a few contracts. Fucking vets haven't been getting their medication delivered, so the farmer's dog is too fucked to do it.
Gilbert swiftly changes the subject.
You seen Quick Mick about recently?
Saw him in here at dinner time.
Replied Johnny.
Went for a piss. He was in there kicking the living shit out of the Johnny machine. The fucking thing exploded. Me and him filled our pockets. Want one?
Johnny putting on a suggestive smile.
Cheeky prick.
Snaps Gilbert.
Whatever do you mean, Gibbsy?
Johnny replies.
Is it because a certain clever chap entered his testicles into a conquest competition back in high school, rendering the aforementioned chap a bit lacking in the sperm count area?
Johnny sniggers.
Look, you twat. I won that competition. I don't regret a thing. Buy me a pint or I'm going to use my award-winning conker on your nose.
Alright, Fred. Give me 2 pints, 2 shots, and a picture of your strongest shit you have.
5.5 hours later, the pub's inhabitants have taken a turn for the worse. Fred, the bartender, has passed out upside down, with one of his feet resting on the top of the fridge. Underneath him, and indeed everywhere you look, there are pints of lager and empty bottles. Across the bar, 7 or 8 people are sleeping face down, breathing in spilled booze. 2 men in the back are playing pool using Fred's missing wooden leg. In the corner of the room, Gilbert, Johnny, Quick Mick, and an old man wearing a top hat are deep in conversation.
So, Mick, what you're saying is...
Splutters Johnny.
There's a young, hot, naked woman that lives in the women's toilets, waiting for the first man to enter and shout the phrase, "Can someone take a nibble on my sausage roll?" so she can be free from the terrible gypsy curse?
Yep,
Says Mick.
happened back in the 40s. The fucking 40s. What the fuck, Mick?
Sneers Gilbert.
She'll be
He pauses to count.
at least 57. Nah,
Says Mick.
but the curse makes her never age. She's made to suffer eternity as a toilet-dwelling virgin.
The old man in the top hat rises sneakily up from his seat, noticeably rubbing his crotch. He stumbles his way across to the woman's toilets at the other side of the pub.
Fuck me, the old pervert's going for it.
Says Johnny. The old man opens up the toilet door with anticipation and screams,
Can someone take a nibble on my sausage roll?
Gilbert, Johnny, and Mick's faces are bursting with excitement as they watch on. Beyond the doorway, with a fizzle and a poof of smoke, a smoking hot young girl appears in a very dated set of lingerie.
Well, hello, Top Hat Man. Would you mind if I took a nibble on your sausage roll?
He looks gobsmacked, jaw hanging to the floor. Mick, Johnny, and Gilbert are in stitches. The Top Hat Man enters the toilet, heading towards the vivid image of the woman. In his eyes, the scene before him was hazy and dreamlike, with heavenly music playing in his head.
Come here, you magnificent stallion of a man.
The woman beckons, signaling with her finger. Continuing his slow approach, he starts to feel up and down the woman, making excited growls. Eventually, he moves in and starts snogging her. Well, it looks more like a dog trying to reach a bit of food stuck down a small diameter pipe. Back in the real world, the three men sitting back at the table are all over the place with laughter, gasping for breath and bashing their fists on the booze-covered table.
You didn't tell him about the gas leak in there, then?
Mick struggles to ask due to laughing. Laying on the floor outside the toilet was a sign that read, "Warning, danger, no entry to female toilets due to gas leak, may cause hallucinations." It had been hanging on the wall in plain view, but the shitty sellotape Fred used had eventually lost its grip. Back to the Top Hat Man, who's still in his own fantasy. In the real world, he's standing one leg on the ground, the other on the toilet seat, pants down, bare-assed, shagging the plastic toilet roll dispenser. Outside, a few blurry minutes later, the three of them are all standing lighting up cigarettes. The sound of Johnny's motorbike still running in the background.
So how the fuck are we getting home?
Says Gilbert, leaning up against the pub wall, preventing himself falling over.
I ain't fucking walking,
replies Quick Mick, looking over his shoulder as he pisses up against a police car door. They all glance down at Johnny's bike.
Hold on.
Says Johnny.
I saw a trailer around the corner.
He disappears round the corner and comes stumbling back with a child's red and yellow trailer.
Now all we need is a bit of rope and some duct tape.
Quick Mick puts his hands in his pockets and pulls out a length of rope and some duct tape. Gilbert, with a look of utter bemusement, splutters,
Why in the name of Pope Gregory II's half-eaten left testicle have you got that in your pocket? Thought it might come in handy sometime,
replies Mick, looking smug. The three of them get to work. 5 minutes of stumbling around the poorly lit pub car park later, they have successfully managed the half-arsed job of attaching a child's toy trailer to a motorbike using duct tape and rope.
Right, get on,
says Johnny as he jumps onto the seat. Mick and Gilbert both squeeze into the trailer.
Hold on, you pricks!
Johnny shouts as he fully opens up the throttle. The bike does a wheelie, forcing the front end of the trailer down onto the road. They take off like a hamster that has been strapped to a brick and thrown off a cliff, disappearing into the night. On a quiet stretch of road, a couple of miles outside of town, 2 fat policemen are sitting in their car by the side of the road. Dimly lit by a street light above, they are tucking into their midnight snacks. Every food imaginable is either half spilled down their fronts, spread around the footwells, or awaiting in wrappers for their turn in the back seats. The policeman in the passenger seat is hanging a speed gun out the window, while the other feeds a bacon roll into his gaping mouth. Suddenly, there's a sound similar to what you would get if you tied a lion's arse down onto a sandpaper-coated treadmill. The 2 policemen look across at one another with a confused look.
Fucking hell!
Gilbert screams. The bike and trailer, Gilbert now on top of Mick bouncing up and down violently, thunders past the police car. The police glance down at the speed gun. It reads, "?" miles per hour. The 2 fat policemen stash their half-eaten bacon rolls down the sides of the door for later eating and take off in pursuit. The policeman in the passenger seat goes on the CB.
Car Delta Bravo to base, Car Delta Bravo to base. We are in pursuit of Well, by the looks of it, 3 drunk idiots on a motorbike with a toy trailer duct taped to it.
They look at each other with one eyebrow raised in confusion. Johnny looks over his shoulder.
Ah, shit, it's the robbers. They'll never take me alive.
Mick and Gilbert exchange a nervous glance. Johnny pulls down hard on the handlebars, making a near 90-degree turn onto an old hill road. The trailer following behind drifts out and slams into the side of the gate. The police car follows, sirens blaring.
Stop the motorcycle!
Comes the order from the police car's megaphone. Johnny shouts back to the boys,
Get them off our ass!
Tearing through the open field in the pitch black, grass and sheep shit flying through the air, Mick and Gibbs search around for a plan. Granted, trying to make a plan of any sort, tearing through a dark field at 60 miles per hour on a toddler's trailer can be a tad difficult. Gibbs, though, has a plan.
I've got it. Hold my legs, Mick.
Mick holds Gilbert's legs as he hangs out over the side of the trailer.
Gotcha, you bastard!
Shouts Gilbert. He reappears back in the trailer holding a sheep by its hind leg. It's shaking vigorously, trying to get loose, baying constantly in terror. He lets out a grunt and throws the sheep out the back. Back! The sheep lands on the bonnet of the police car and bounces off to the side. The engine clanks and rattles to a stop as smoke pours from under the bonnet.
I fucking told you we should have paid extra for sheep-proofing, you moron!
Says the driving policeman as he punches the other one in the face. Johnny, Gilbert, and Mick roar with joy as they disappear into the night. It's 4 a.m. on a quiet street. Not a sound in the air. The sound of the bike can be heard in the distance, getting louder and louder. Rising above the horizon, the 2 piercing headlights come into view. The bike is still powering along like a bull on speed. Johnny hasn't noticed the speed bump. A few seconds later, the bike, trailer, and it crew have been catapulted into the air. They seem to spend an eternity in the air as they pass across the silhouette of the moon, arms and legs flailing. But what goes up must come down. The whole lot crash over a hedge at the front of a house with a massive bang. A very chirpy Johnny can be heard behind the hedge.
Right, who's on for an after party at Gilbert's house?
He's standing dusting himself off with his hands. Gilbert and Mick are a bit less happy about the whole situation. They're laying entangled with each other, the trailer, the rope, and the bike.
I think my legs are broken,
says Mick very faintly.
I feel like I've been in a permanent wash cycle in a washing machine for 3 days with 3 bricks to keep me company,
replies Gilbert, panting.
Yeah, give me a fucking drink.
As luck would have it, they actually landed in Gilbert's front garden. They stumble up the steps and into the house. The door opens and Gilbert flicks the light switch.
What the hell, Gibbsy? This is what you call doing up your living room?
Says Johnny, with a look of disgust on his face. They are stood in the entrance, steps to the second floor directly ahead, kitchen down the hall, and the living room to the right. They all look towards the living room. The entire room had been painted orange, illuminated by 2 orange lamps at the sides of the room and an orange light on the roof. There's a 3-piece dark orange sofa set, orange carpet over a wooden floor, a large picture of a tiger on the wall, and a fruit bowl consisting only of oranges on a side table.
I like orange,
says Gilbert, shrugging. Mick and Johnny look at one another. Their faces look like they had been badly smeared with fake tan.
It's like a gathering of the fucking Dale Winton fan club,
says Mick as they burst out laughing.
Just sit down and I'll get the drinks, says
Gilbert as he walks into the kitchen at the back of the room. Compared to the newly done-up and furnished living room, the kitchen isn't quite as tidy or well looked after, although it isn't quite on the same repulsive level of Johnny's house. He kicks aside a couple of dirty laundry baskets to get access to the top cupboards. He hunts through the cupboards, pulling out empty bottle after empty bottle, stacking them up on the table.
Ah, shit. Looks like I'm going to have to improvise,
he mutters. Sifting through the cupboards, he begins gathering the ingredients.
The guys will love this.
He pours the bottles into a large jug, reading out the names of each ingredient as he goes.
Half a jug of old beetroot juice, a tin of super strength lager, 3 nips of white wine vinegar, a dash of Dr. Napalm's industrial floor cleaner, 3 prawn cocktail crisps, a bottle of hot chili sauce, and a large squirt of the dodgy ulcer treatment jelly bought from a hippie in a back alley.
Gilbert, looking very pleased with himself, takes the jug and 3 glasses through to the sitting room and sets it on the table.
Tuck in, lads. This'll give the liver a good kick.
They all take a large glass full and start drinking. Daylight is shining in through the opaque orange curtains. Gilbert is lying passed out on the couch with drawn-on eyebrows and "fuck on eyebrows" written on his forehead. Johnny suddenly falls out of a cupboard with shoes cello-taped to his ears. Quick Mick has broken through the roof from the floor above with just his head and shoulders through. They come to one by one, groaning as their eyes open. In the background, a television is showing the mid-morning news. The local female news anchor begins her script.
The police are on the hunt for 3 men who broke into the local zoo and sexually assaulted 65 penguins with a toothbrush. The zookeeper says the penguins are in utter shock. They are all lined up with their back against the wall. The 3 men are assumed to be armed with devices of a sexual nature, 2 of them with no eyebrows, although one of them had a set drawn on. The others had shoes cell-tipped to his head.
The 3 men slowly turn to one another and grunt in unison.
Ah, fuck.
Fuck.